employee of the department may be detailed from an agency to any other agency or office of the department for more than 30 days unless the office is fully reimbursed by the receiving agency. Section 739, none of the funds may be used to pay the salaries or expenses of personnel to inspect horses.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Wyoming seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Offered by Mrs. Lummis of Wyoming. Page 77, line 12. Strike the semicolon and insert or. Page 77, line 15. Strike or and insert a period. Page 77, strike lines 16 through 17.
The gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment would remove the restriction only on the fee-for-service horse meat inspection portion. Since fiscal year 2006, Congress has prohibited the use of federal funds to inspect horses. However, the USDA allowed for a fee-for-service program for mandatory inspections of horses destined for food until 2008, when Congress prohibited the program through an appropriations rider. Before these bans, horse processing was a $65 million a year industry, and owners could receive about $400 to $800 when selling a horse. I'm offering this amendment because owners should have the option of selling their horse for processing under their personal property rights. It is not the federal government's role to ban this option. The decision to allow for processing should be made by the states. The Senate Committee on Appropriations has directed GAO to examine the effects of this ban on the welfare of horses and on the agriculture industry. This report was expected by March 1st of 2010. Over a full year later, we still have yet to be delivered a final report from GAO, but expect one within weeks of this debate. It is important that this analysis be considered when determining whether to consider this ban. In particular, the GAO was asked to examine how many horses are now being shipped to Mexico and Canada for slaughter, which outside analysis has confirmed is increasing. With the increased exporting of animals comes the concern of longer transportation times to slaughter and reduced inspections by USDA of travel conditions. USDA has no authority to ensure humane treatment once horses cross the border to Mexico or Canada, and there's no reason to believe horses are receiving better treatment by continuing this ban. Additionally, there continue to be reports of increased animal abuse during the reduced options for unwanted horses. I can assure you this is true in my home state of Wyoming. Recently, 100 horses have been seized from a western Wyoming ranch where they were being starved and had to be transported to the eastern side of the state to the state's Cheyenne stockyards. While the state veterinarian is caring for the animals currently, the options for selling these horses are limited. There is just no place to send unwanted horses, and neglect will continue to rise across the country without a viable alternative. In fact, the Wyoming legislature this year made it a crime to release a horse onto public lands. Now, the reason people do that is because there's no other way to get rid of an unwanted horse. There's no opportunity to sell them into this meat market, so people are turning them loose with the feral horses, the wild horses, further exacerbating the federal wild horse problem. Congress needs to examine these concerns, and the GAO report should provide us the information needed to make an educated decision on this matter. Now, I plan to withdraw my amendment after discussing this issue, but would like to provide my colleagues with the opportunities to present their state's concerns with this ban and to ensure moving forward we examine the GAO report before finalizing any appropriations language before fiscal year 2012. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. Is anyone else wishing to be recognized?
Because it won't pass and they don't want to jeopardize it in the Senate. Do you want to speak? please. Seek.
Gentleman from New Mexico, seek recognition. The gentleman from New Mexico is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the gentlelady from Wyoming bringing this bill. You know, many times people think that that horse slaughter is just simply inhumane. Somehow they think that horse starvation is somehow more humane. The truth is that people are going to get rid of their horses in some way. So what they do in New Mexico and in the western states is they simply take them out and turn them loose. Now, right now we're struggling with an economy that is having difficulties from every area. And too often we say it's just a problem of the economy. We don't break it down to its individual components. One of the components in New Mexico is that we've completely eliminated sheep from New Mexico. New Mexico used to be a large area of sheep production. That piece of the economy is simply gone because of regulations that we in Washington and in the states have put into place. New Mexico also used to have a vibrant apple population, apple economy. That's now gone because we have given favorable treatment to overseas products. But then this is another element of an economy that has simply disappeared. New Mexico used to have a vibrant horse trade. Prices were high. Now then prices on horses are low because people know that they have no option at the end of a horse's life, so it's simply doing away with the horse market. So we find that we in Congress are causing the economic decay of our entire nation, and the lady's amendment simply says, let's study the effects, let's understand what is going on that we ourselves are causing. Let's understand the economic duress that Washington and the states are putting on their own economies. It makes ultimate sense, and for us in the West, it should be absolutely reinstated. We should reinstate the market there because horses are being very inhumanely treated in the guise of some more humane treatment. So I would yield back and thank the lady for her presentation.
The gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chairman, move to strike the last word.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 5 minutes.
I rise in support of the Loomis amendment. I'm disappointed that she's planning to withdraw it and that we will not be having a vote on it. We had a vote on it in full committee. It was actually Mr. Moran's amendment that pulled it out. I did not support the gentleman from Virginia's amendment because I believe there's a lot of emotion that goes on when we're dealing with a horse. It still is a private property issue, a personal property issue, and while I do not own horses, I have family members who own horses. I know that you do have to have some place to move the horse on when it ages out on you, and it's very emotional in America. We look down at other nations that eat horses, but I have eaten horse before. In Kazakhstan, I ate horse, and it wasn't bad. But we as Americans, we have an obesity problem, and so we can pick and choose what we want to eat, what we don't want to eat, and people feel like, well, we're too good to be eating horses, and I understand that. But the rest of the world does eat horses, and I think, frankly, that's a different discussion, as my friend from Virginia knows. But I wish we were having a vote on it. And if the gentleman, do you want to get some time from me, or do you really need to use 5 minutes? Let me just yield to you, and we'll give you some time here. Okay. I yield back the balance of my time, but I did want to encourage the gentlewoman to continue working on this. I will be supportive of you, and I will work with our friends from Virginia on it as well. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Is there anyone else wishing to seek recognition on this amendment? The gentleman from Virginia is recognized. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
And I do rise in opposition to this amendment that would allow horse slaughtering to resume in the United States. The language that the lady's amendment would strike was put into the bill as a bipartisan amendment. 2 Republicans and a Democrat, Mr. Sweeney, Mr. Whitfield, and Mr. Spratt. What it did is to restrict funding for federal activities involved with meat inspection, and thereby it stopped horse slaughter for the purpose of human consumption in any facility in the United States. And it stopped new facilities from opening. Well, it passed this body by an overwhelming vote, 269 to 158. Now, every year since, the language has been retained in the Agriculture Appropriations Bill. There's 6 very good reasons for doing this. One, it's money badly spent. Only foreign corporations which deal in horse meat for consumption in foreign markets would benefit from the federal inspection of U.S. horse slaughter plants. So we're using American taxpayers' money to inspect meat so that foreign corporations can send it overseas so people living in foreign countries can consume it. There's a $37 million cut below last year's levels in the Food Safety and Inspection Service. So here you are cutting $37 million in food safety inspection, and yet you would be adding this additional burden onto the Food Safety Inspection Service, an additional responsibility to inspect horse meat. Remember, this is meat that will be exclusively consumed in foreign countries. Before the ban, most meat was exported to France, Belgium, and Japan. We should be using our resources to focus on meat consumed by our constituents. The American public overwhelmingly does not support the slaughter of horses for human consumption. 3/4 of our constituents across the country oppose slaughter of horses for human consumption. Thirdly, American horse meat invariably contains harmful chemicals because horses are not raised for human consumption. A recent FDA toxicity report found any number of substances that could cause adverse effects in humans. One example is phenylbutazone. It's known as bute. It's the most common anti-inflammatory given to horses. It's difficult to know every substance given to every horse in the United States because they're not intended to be raised as food, so they're given different chemicals. The only way to ensure that such harmful substances don't make it into the food supply is to prevent horse meat from entering the market. Fourth, most horses since the slaughter are in fact healthy. Sometimes it's framed, as my friend from Georgia suggested, this is a way to dispose of unwanted horses. The facts don't support this claim. When horse slaughter was allowed in the U.S., 92% of horses sent to slaughter were healthy, could continue to have been used as productive animals. They weren't old and infirm, because sick and old horses aren't used as a food source. People don't want to eat meat from sick, old horses. So we're talking about primarily healthy horses. Other more humane options are available. A licensed veterinarian can humanely euthanize a horse for $225. That's not cost prohibitive. But I want to underscore, too, my very good friend was complaining that there was too much emotion in this argument. What's wrong with emotion? I mean, the horses inspire us. That's why most of the statues around the U.S. Capitol, they're horses, heroes riding on horses. Horses were critical to the expansion of the West. They aided in the development of agriculture. They provide entertainment and recreation. Similar to dogs and cats, they are treasured, loyal companion animals. We revere them, and that's why the American public rejects the slaughtering them for human consumption. So let's just summarize here. A vote for this amendment is a vote to overturn established policy that was enacted under Republicans, supported by the American people, to prevent horse slaughter to resume in this country. We would be diverting inspection funding, which is being cut substantially, diverting that to inspect meat that foreign corporations will be able to sell to foreign consumers. That's not something this body should support. And with that, I can argue against every claim that was made, but I don't think I'll take up your time to do that.
The gentleman's time has expired.
At this point, I suspect my time has expired. I thank the chairman for yielding. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Nebraska rise?
I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman from Nebraska is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do want to clarify for the record that this amendment is not about tax dollars. This amendment is about adjusting some policy that was put into an appropriations bill some time ago, long before the current makeup of Congress. And we're talking about a fee-for-service scenario that would allow the private sector to ensure that there is safe, affordable horse meat to the general public, to a market overseas that is very robust. But let me say that a GAO study on the effects of horse slaughter plant closings on the welfare of horses and the farm economy as a whole was requested by the Senate Ag Appropriations Committee more than a year and a half ago and is overdue for a report. The devastated horse industry continues to be attacked by misinformation, and we certainly have a problem here because I would allege that the horse economics or the ownership of horses, the economics are upside down. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the result of this misguided campaign will eventually be a nation where very few can even afford to own a horse. Without a secondary market, the value of horses at every level has plunged. Fewer horses means fewer jobs, fewer horse trailers sold, fewer veterinary service dollars spent, fewer saddles sold, and the list continues. Destroying the U.S. horse industry closed the U.S. to a very robust global market and gave other countries this economic opportunity. With the ability to ethically produce horse meat under regulated, humane conditions in the United States, we would almost immediately create jobs and minimize suffering. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there anyone else wishing to seek recognition? For what purpose does the gentlelady from Wyoming seek recognition?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, the gentleman from Virginia inadvertently misrepresented the terms of this amendment. They only applied to the fee-for-service component. With that, Mr.
Gentleman will withdraw.
The gentlelady's already spoken on her amendment.
I'm asking for unanimous consent
I
to
didn't,
withdraw.
and we never heard that. And I object. You can if you withdraw the amendment, I won't object.
She is.
She hasn't you haven't withdrawn it, as far as I know.
Well, now I'm not going to withdraw the amendment.
Okay,
I'll ask for. I ask for a vote.
I'll ask for a vote. She was going to.
In recognition. For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Let me just say to the gentlelady, I move to strike the last word. Let me just say to the gentlelady that this is an emotional issue, and those of us that do not agree with you feel strongly about it. Now, I believe if you put that amendment in, it could very well jeopardize the ag bill, and I don't think you want to do that. So I hope you'll reconsider withdrawing this amendment. In committee, your amendment was defeated. And there's a lot of people in this country that feel very strongly on both sides of this issue. But the American public, whether or not you agree with them, feel very strongly, as Mr. Moran said. And so I hope you'll change your mind. And regarding some of the things that I've heard, and I was not going to speak on this, what is it? Did you have something, Jay, you want to say? Regarding some of the things I've heard about these horses starving to death on the plains and everything, there are a number of people in this country that are willing to put up millions and millions of dollars. In fact, I know some of them who have bought ranches and want to take these wild horses and put them into a area where they'll be safe, they'll be protected, and they will be cared for. And we're talking about maybe, in addition to the ranches, another 600,000 or 700,000 acres that would be used for these horses and for them to be able to survive. If you have ever looked at the way they transport these horses to slaughter, they cram 20 horses into a truck that was built for 10. They don't feed them. They don't water them properly. And those horses are so mistreated, it's unbelievable when they go to slaughter, and that's why they close these slaughterhouses. In addition, you ought to see what they do in these slaughterhouses for these horses. They hang them up by a hook while they're still alive and they're squealing, and they kill them in a very inhumane way. Now, you know, I am not for changing our agricultural attitudes in this country. We have to have the slaughter of pigs and cows and chickens and that sort of thing. And so a lot of times people say if we're against horse slaughter, we want to do something to hurt the agricultural community. That couldn't be further from the truth. We just want to make sure that these animals are treated in a humane way, number one, And number two, that the American taxpayer is not paying for the French to get horse meat. And so let me just say to the lady one more time, I sincerely hope that she will reconsider. We have a disagreement. You know, I love you. But I hope you'll reconsider and withdraw this amendment, because I don't think something of this emotional status should impede or impair something as important as the Ag Bill. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Just right, the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I rise in strong support of the amendment and believe that while it may be an emotional issue, and as my friend from Virginia said and my friend from Indiana, emotion is good, I think that there can be emotion on both sides, but there's also a lot of logic in the gentlewoman's position, and that's why I'm a strong supporter of it. And recognizing that she's on her feet, I'd like to yield her the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I withdraw the amendment, I wish to correct that this amendment has never been considered in committee or on the floor. This amendment only applies to the two lines in this horse inspection issue which deal with an individual's right to pay their own money to have a horse inspected. There are no taxpayer dollars involved in this amendment. I'm only striking the two lines that now you're even not allowing people to pay their own money to have a horse inspected. With that opportunity to correct the record, Mr. Chairman, I withdraw my amendment.
The gentleman first yield back his time.
Yield back.
Is there objection to withdrawal of the amendment? Seeing none, so ordered. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments, on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Do I read off? First, the amendment offered by Ms. DeLauro of Connecticut, the amendment offered by Mr. Sessions of Texas, the amendment offered by Mr. Farr of California, amendment number 8 by Mr. Brown of Georgia, amendment offered by Mr. Chaffetz of Utah, amendment number 4 by Mr. Brown of Georgia, the amendment offered by Mr. Clark of Michigan, amendment number 9 by Mr. Brown of Georgia, amendment offered by Ms. Richardson of California, the amendment A by Mr. Gosar of Arizona, amendment A by Mr. Brown of Georgia, the amendment offered by Ms. Fox of North Carolina, amendment number 12 by Mr. Brown of Georgia, amendment B by Mr. Gosar of Arizona, amendment B by Mr. Brown of Georgia, amendment C by Mr. Brown of Georgia, and amendment offered by Mr. Stearns of Florida. The Chair will reduce to 2 minutes the time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business in the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Ms. DeLauro, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. DeLauro of Connecticut.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by an electronic device.
After debating agriculture spending late last night and today, the House starting votes on amendments to the $125 billion bill. Heard quite a bit of debate on the nutrition programs covered in the legislation, namely the WIC program for low-income pregnant women and infants and children up to age 5 who are found to be at nutritional risk. The Ag Bill also covers crop insurance programs and agriculture research. Here's more from a Capitol Hill reporter.
Ellen Ferguson is with Congressional Quarterly. Well, the House is working again today. It's the second day of work on the annual spending bill to fund agriculture and food programs for the next fiscal year. How's the work going?
Well, they are going through amendments that are being offered. So far, there's a lot of talk, not many votes. Those will be held later this afternoon, and then they're going to take a break to go over to the White House from 6 to 8, and then they'll come back, and I believe there will be further discussion. There's some question at this point about when they will finish up and when there will be a vote on passage.
House Democrats were able to slow work on the bill Tuesday evening in protest. What were they protesting and why?
Well, they rallied around a program, a nutrition program, Women, Infants, and Children, which serves roughly about 8 million women and children age 5 and under a month. There are proposed cuts to it of $600 to $700 million. It would still be funded at just above $600 million with a contingency fund. Democrats argued that a cut like this at a time when the economy is still soft would wind up meaning that several hundred thousand women and children would be turned away. Republicans argued that these are tough fiscal times and that they have made judicious cuts and that there are contingency funds to serve as sort of a safety net or backup should there be a surge in demand.
What other key amendments should we expect to come up during debate?
Well, there will be a number of amendments offered by Republicans on WIC, looking for to take money out of it to put it into a spending reserve fund.
And remind us what WIC is.
WIC is Women, Infants, and Children. It's the nutrition program. And it is very easy to fall into these acronyms, but WIC is a little faster than Women, Infants, and Children. But there will be a number of amendments offered on that. Democrats will be offering amendments to take money from other places to put it into WIC, the nutrition program. And then we'll come to Title VII, which is the last title in the bill. And there are several key points that will be argued. Here there will be points of order on a language that would lower the average adjusted gross income level required to qualify for various payments from the Agriculture Department if you're a farmer. There will be some additional amendments offered to lower it even further. This has been a flashpoint, and this is something that a number of people want changed. The administration has had its own proposals that have been ignored. You will also see amendments offered on the United States struck a deal last year to make payments to the Brazilian Cotton Institute in order for Brazil not to levy retaliatory tariffs on not only agriculture but auto industry and a number of other industries because it has won a World Trade Organization ruling. So that's the title where I think you're going to see a lot of fireworks.
Very quickly, just a couple of seconds left. The Obama administration has voiced objection to several aspects of the bill, and we're not hearing a veto threat coming from the White House. Can you tell us what the administration is opposed to, very quickly?
Well, the administration is opposed to some of the things I've raised, the reductions for women, infants, and children, the language dealing with the payments to the Brazilian Cotton Institute, also concerns about the fact that they believe that the bill just goes too far on a number of areas in trying to roll back administration policies on nutrition programs in particular.
Ellen Ferguson is with Congressional Quarterly. We thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The House continuing to vote on the amendment to the 2012 Agriculture Spending Bill. A bipartisan group of 10 lawmakers is suing President Obama and Defense Secretary Gates for taking military action against Libya without getting authorization from Congress. The Associated Press writes that the lawmakers want a judge to issue an order suspending military operations without congressional approval. A few of the plaintiffs are Democratic Representatives Dennis Kucinich of Ohio and John Conyers of Michigan, and among the Republicans are Representatives Walter Jones and Howard Coble of North Carolina. Meanwhile, the White House is sending lawmakers a report outlining the objectives of U.S. military involvement in Libya and making a legal case for continuing the campaign. The White House briefing today, spokesperson Jay Carney talked about that, saying that the report is more than 30 pages long and would answer questions posed in a non-binding House resolution about the House voted on earlier this month.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't have any announcements, so I will go straight to questions. Jim.
Hi, Jay. Thank you. I wonder if you could tell us when the White House became aware that Pakistanis had arrested people who had assisted in the operation to raid bin Laden's compound in Abbottabad.
I don't have any specific information for you about that report. I can say that our relationship with Pakistan is extremely important. It is also complicated, and we have made that clear and been quite candid about that for a long time. And it is important to remember that the relationship is important because it helps our national security interests to maintain it. Pakistan has worked with us to go after terrorism and terrorists. More terrorists have been killed on Pakistani soil than in any other country. So we continue to work with the Pakistanis. Sometimes we have difficult issues to work through with them, but it remains an important relationship.
Well, there appears to be a pattern. These arrests aside, you had an event episode a couple of weeks ago where U.S. intelligence shared information with the Pakistanis regarding two bomb-making compounds, and then the militants apparently fled. Does the president is he frustrated with this kind of pattern? And let me ask you what the Senate Intelligence Committee asked last week of the Deputy CIA Director, which is a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rank Pakistani cooperation on matters of counterterrorism?
Well, without addressing that specific ranking, I would say that we acknowledge that it is a complicated relationship, and I think that's pretty candid. And I think we have also made clear that the cooperation we do get is vital and essential to our war against terrorism and terrorists. And we will continue that relationship for precisely that reason. When we have issues, we deal with them. And obviously there was, in the wake of the successful mission against Osama bin Laden, we have reached out and engaged with the Pakistani government and our counterparts in Pakistan at many levels, precisely because this relationship is so important.
Well, it seems that the administration is merely accepting the fact that it's a complicated relationship. Are you doing anything to improve the relationship?
Well, just what I just said. We work constantly to improve the relationship, to improve the cooperation, and whatever number you pick on the scale of cooperation, that number represents significant success in combating terrorism and eliminating terrorists. Terrorists who threaten Pakistan, terrorists who threaten the United States and threaten our allies. So again, we don't do this except with those priorities in mind. So it's not always an easy relationship, but it is a vital one.
On Afghanistan, the President is meeting with Secretary Gates today. Is Afghanistan drawdown on the agenda, and have you received a recommendation from the Pentagon?
The President, as you know, has a weekly meeting with Secretary Gates. That is what this meeting is. We had, with the Vice President when he's in town. Afghanistan routinely comes up in those weekly meetings. I'm not saying it's on the agenda. We don't read out the weekly meetings with Secretary Gates or the weekly meetings with Secretary Clinton. So I would simply leave it at that. On the second question, as I've said before, the President will be looking at recommendations from his commanders, including General Petraeus, having discussions with his commanders, Secretary Gates' national security team going forward. I'm not going to give you a blow-by-blow about when those meetings are taking place and the content of those meetings, but he said, the President did, that he will make a decision soon about the beginning of the drawdown. I would make the point that this is the continuation, the implementation of a process he set in motion in December of 2009. This is not a reopening of a review of our policy. It is the implementation of his policy. which is succeeding, is making progress. The stated goals: disrupt, dismantle, defeat al-Qaeda. We've had enormous success in achieving that goal. Stopping the Taliban's momentum. We've had significant progress in achieving that goal. As he reviews the options, he will obviously consult with a number of people. But the President has been a deeply engaged participant in the Afghanistan policy from the beginning. As you know, he has chaired monthly Situation Room meetings on AFPAC, as we call it. And of course, Afghanistan and Pakistan are elements of his national security conversations all the time.
Can I just follow?
I will go in order here. Yes.
Thanks. Senate Republican leader John Kyle said today that July 1st was the Biden group's goal for a deal on the debt ceiling. I wondered if the White House is also envisioning that timeline end of next week, and if the President is intending to get involved directly in
well, we certainly endorse the idea that we need to make progress in these talks, as we have, and expect that we will continue to make progress. I don't have a deadline for you, and I know that the Vice President has spoken to this, and I would refer you to some of his comments. And I'm sorry, was there a second question? Okay.
The President's involved.
The President is regularly involved, and he will, I'm sure, as this process moves forward, engage even more directly with leaders. But I can tell you that he is frequently updated on the progress of the negotiations by the Vice President, by the Vice President's Chief of Staff, Bruce Reed, by other members of his economic team. And he will continue to be having those, getting those updates, and he will engage directly at the appropriate time. Yes, Dan.
I want to go back to Pakistan again, and the fact that you keep talking about this relationship as being complicated. At any point, looking down the road, does the administration foresee a scenario where you have to have tough love, where you really have to start looking at perhaps the aid to Pakistan in order to bring that friendship back to the middle?
I think, Dan, that we are very clear-eyed about this, and we pursue this relationship and value it and state its importance precisely because it is in the national security interests of the United States of America to have this relationship and to maintain the cooperation that we do get, the significant cooperation that we do get from Pakistan in this incredibly important and volatile region of the world. I don't think that we are remotely naive about the challenges in the relationship, in the region, and in dealing with the variety of issues that confront us. But I would say again, it is important to remember the successes we have had, successes that have come in many cases precisely because we have this cooperation. That is why we actively work to ensure that we have cooperation going forward.
So there will be no divorce in this relationship?
I don't anticipate that.
About the progress that's being made on debt talks, how would you rate that progress? Significant progress? Is it more progress than progress that we heard last week? Or
yes, I think that, as you know, we have stepped up the pace of meetings. The Vice President has had a second meeting today. He had one yesterday. He will have another one tomorrow. We obviously are interested in moving this process forward. No one suggested it is easy, and I don't want to suggest by stating the fact that we believe that the talks have made progress that you know, they're all sitting around a table and laughing it up because it's so easy. It's not. These are hard issues, and obviously we have a lot of differences. But the stakes are high in the sense that everyone agrees we have to have significant deficit reduction, and everyone agrees as the sort of parallel issue here that we need to raise the debt ceiling so that we do not default on our obligations. People have, those participants in those negotiations have brought a level of seriousness to them that is essential to making the progress that we've made. I don't want to give any predictions or percentages on how much progress we've made or how optimistic I am about the ultimate success of those talks, because they are difficult, but we do remain optimistic.
Scale of 1 to 10?
Again, I won't rate it, but yes.
A new study by the Center for Public Integrity found that nearly 200 of the president's biggest donors have landed plum government jobs and advisory posts, won millions of dollars in federal contracts for their businesses, and attended elite White House meetings. Do you have any response?
Well, I would simply say that this administration looks for the most qualified candidates who represent Americans from all walks of life when it makes appointments. The administration also has, across the board, the toughest ethics standards in history, including a bold commitment to transparency, which I have discussed frequently from here. Now, the people we have appointed, the President has appointed to key positions, all have sterling academic credentials, years of public service and private sector experience that make them eminently qualified for the positions to which they were appointed. And I would make the point here that having enacted these high ethical standards, the highest in history, and having pursued and delivered on a level of transparency that is unprecedented, it is important to note that being a supporter does not qualify you for a job or guarantee you a job, but it does not disqualify you, obviously. So we stand by all of our appointments. We believe they are enormously qualified for the jobs that they hold.
And how does that square with what the President said in his announcement speech in 2007? He said, quote, "The cynics and the lobbyists and the special interests who've turned our government into a game only they can afford to play. They write the checks and you get stuck with the bills. They get the access while you get to write a letter." He said the time for that politics is over.
Well, right, but we were talking about, you asked me about supporters of the President who may have been donors who have gotten positions, and I would point out to the fact that the people who got those positions got them because of their credentials. They also happen to be donors in some cases. There are obviously numerous and far many more cases of people who weren't donors who were appointed to jobs. And that's a lot different from the problem that exists in Washington and existed in Washington with special interests having lobbying success here in terms of the effect that has on legislation that's produced in Congress and signed into law. So, and we have been incredibly aggressive in that. I mean, we are, again, it is important to remember the kinds of transparency, the kind of transparency we have made a regular practice here, including releasing the waves logs, something that is never done before in terms of visitors to the White House, and the other measures we've taken in terms of the what you can and cannot do in the wake of serving in this administration in terms of lobbying and that sort of thing. So we believe that we've taken important measures that qualify the praise that this administration has gotten for its high ethical standards, and we stand by that.
Yes. Jay, following up on that, are you saying that raising or bundling $100,000 or $500,000 does not give a person any leg up in looking for an administration job?
I am saying that. I'm saying that the President appoints people based on their qualifications.
It has nothing to do with raising him $500,000.
Sure. I think that I didn't raise $500,000. I didn't raise any money. I'm standing here, and the fact is that the President made clear that he would make political appointments, as every President before him has, but we have enacted ethical standards and levels of transparency that are unprecedented, that we believe should give the American people the kind of confidence that they have lacked in the past, that the people that the President has appointed to these jobs are highly qualified and have the credentials necessary to perform their duties.
So nearly 80% of the people who bundled more than $500,000 got key administration positions. That has nothing to do with the money they raised.
I don't know. We can have this discussion. Those people are highly qualified individuals who happen to be highly successful in the things that they've done in life. But the fact is, I would look at the people we've appointed, look at their credentials, look at their qualifications.
Look at the money they've raised. That's not a factor.
And I'm saying it is not a disqualification for office to have been a supporter of the President.
Would it be wrong to reward people for the hard work of raising $500,000?
It would be wrong if they weren't qualified.
But would it be
and
wrong
we stand by
the
it would be wrong if they were not qualified. I think I answered your question.
Would it be wrong to take that as consider that as a factor, that hard work of raising all that money, $500,000? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of work.
I think I've said everything I can say about this, and I've answered your question. It would be wrong to appoint someone who wasn't qualified to the job, and the President has appointed highly qualified individuals to the positions that he has appointed as President, and we stand by those appointments.
One other, golf, and if you've answered this, just to ignore it, but is the President going to be discussing the debt and policy and things like that with Boehner, or are they just going to golf?
Well, I think I've said from here before, Chip, that this is a social occasion. It is not, we will not complete our budget negotiations on the, it's hard to imagine that it won't be, but there is not an agenda, there are no talking points. This is simply an effort to get together and outside of an office, outside of the normal venues that presidents and speakers of the House tend to get together and develop further the relationship that the President and the Speaker already have developed in the many meetings and conversations they've had already. But so I think I assume, and I think it's fair for everyone here to assume, that they will discuss all the, in a general way, some of the business out there that they have between them, including the deficit reduction talks. But we don't have an agenda, we don't have an expected outcome. In fact, I think I can say with great confidence that they will not wrap up the 18th hole and come out and say that we have a deal. But I think that for the broader purpose of the work that needs to be done in a bipartisan way in Washington, this social occasion is a good thing, because spending a number of hours together in that kind of environment, I think, can only help improve the chances of bipartisan cooperation. It certainly can't hurt it, unless someone wins really big. And then, yeah.
Back to the investigation, you addressed people who've gotten posts, but another issue.
The investigation.
This about
report.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, the report also brings up the idea that some people who've raised a lot of money work for companies that have gotten stimulus money, for example.
And the vast majority of companies that got stimulus money, a process, by the way, which is largely done in agencies by career employees of the federal government in terms of the bids and that sort of thing. The vast majority of companies were not donors. Were not, did not have people who were bundlers working for them. So, it's not. People were appointed on the merits.
$13.8 million for Level 3 communications after you have a few bundlers is not chump change.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Well, I'm just saying that's a lot of money. $13.8 million in stimulus money if you've got a few bundlers on the team.
Again, you have to explain to me what the question is. $13.8.
Does that pass the journalistic smell test? I mean, if you're...
But what you're saying, as I've said, it does not disqualify you to work for this administration. It certainly hasn't disqualified you in any previous administration to have been a supporter of the President of the United States and to have helped raise money for the President of the United States. Nor does it qualify you or get you a job. You have to have the skills and credentials to do it. And our ethical standards are unmatched by any previous administration. Our efforts of transparency are unprecedented. And that's not just me saying it, it is outside groups who have said that. So, I think that the fact that individuals who have been appointed president is hardly a story.
But here's an outside group that's saying big fundraisers have gotten more than 3,000 White House meetings. So that doesn't sound like, it sounds like money hasn't.
Does it, Mike? I mean, it sounds like you're just throwing out things here, Mike. I mean, we have meetings. By the way, we have meetings that are then made public in a way that has never been the case before through Waves release information. So, you're throwing stuff up without any suggestion of any impropriety, which, by the way, there isn't any suggestion of any impropriety. In fact, having worked a long time with the Vice President on the Recovery Act, it is noted for, and you can talk to the independent IGs that oversee, it has been remarkable in its
on this vote,
level of transparency.
192.
Mr. Conyers. Mr. Conyers votes aye. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess votes no. Mr. Bishop of Utah. Mr. Bishop of Utah votes no.
On this vote, the yeas are 193 and the nays are 226. The amendment is not adopted. The committee will come to order. For what purpose does the gentleman... The committee will come to order. Members, please take your seat. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that the House observe a moment of silence in honor of the victims of the tornado which hit Joplin, Missouri on May 22nd. As the Congressman representing Missouri's 7th District, which includes Joplin, I ask that we observe a moment of silence for those affected by the EF5 tornado that struck this town of 50,000 people on the 22nd of May. This horrific event led to the loss of life of 153 individuals, from babies to folks in their 90s. They also lost 54% of their school capacity, 8,000 homes, and 500 businesses.
Without objection, so ordered. All members, please rise and observe a moment of silence. Without objection, 2-minute voting will continue. The unfinished business in the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Sessions, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by votes void. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Sessions of Texas.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This amendment, offered by Representative Pete Sessions of Texas, would remove the requirement that the Agriculture Secretary submit a report to the departments on the department's contracting policies. 15 more amendment votes in this series after this one. We covered a hearing today about an alcohol, tobacco, and firearms program that whistleblowers say knowingly let American guns fall into the hands of Mexican drug cartels. Politico writing that the Obama administration and Representative Darrell Issa clashed at the hearing. Congressman Issa, a California Republican, contends that the administration had stonewalled his request for records about the investigation, that it may have allowed hundreds of weapons from U.S. gun dealers to flow across the border to Mexican drug gangs. Congressman Issa also says that congressional Democrats are obstructing his inquiry into what he calls reckless and inappropriate decisions by top Justice Department officials. Justice Department officials saying that handing over sensitive documents to Congress could imperil pending prosecutions, including the case involving the murder of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry and the prosecution of 20 people as a result of the gun-running probe. The family of that border guard agent who was killed with one of the guns from the program testified today. You can see that hearing in our overnight programming here on C-SPAN and at cspan.org.
The yeas are 225 and the nays are 199. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Farr, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Farr of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
As voting continues on amendments to the agriculture spending bill, the Associated Press writing that federal immigration authorities are beginning a new round of investigations designed to make sure businesses hire only people authorized to work in the U.S. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement said today it's notifying 1,000 companies that it'll inspect the forms new employees complete and documents they provide to show that they're eligible to work in the U.S.
On this vote, 350 yeas.
Mr. Hastings of Florida. Mr. Hastings of Florida votes aye. Mr. Meeks of New York. Mr. Meeks of New York votes aye.
On this vote, 350 yeas, 70 nays. The amendment is adopted. 352 yeas, 70 nays. There you go. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 8, printed in the congressional record offered by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Brown, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 8, printed in the congressional record